Day 733 of the Trump administration, and we're now into month 2 of this government shutdown. 32 days. It will now become 33 at the end of this hour. We're also just minutes away from another deadline that directly impacts 800,000 federal workers and tens of thousands more who depend on them for their living. At the stroke of midnight Eastern time tonight, those employees miss their second pay period. As anger and frustration over this shutdown grows, the president staying on message. Today, he wrote, this was a big day for capital letters, we should just tell you. Without a wall, our country can never have border or national security. With a powerful wall or steel barrier, crime rates and drugs will go substantially down all over the U.S. The Dems know this, but want to play political games. No cave. Never seen the Senate Majority Leader and Republicans so united on an issue. Well, a major test for that unity comes later this week when the Senate will vote on 2 competing bills to open back up the government. One of them is Trump's proposal that includes, as you well know, the billions to pay for a border wall or barrier or steel slats and temporary protections for certain immigrants, which they threw in. The other is the Democrats' plan to simply reopen the government till February the 8th without funding for the wall, while border security talks continue, but it would get paychecks out to those who've been going without. As of tonight, neither bill expected to clear the 60-vote hurdle for passage. This afternoon, Senate leaders were making their views known from the floor.
All that needs to happen is for our Democratic friends to agree that it's time to put the country ahead of politics, take yes for an answer, and vote to put the standoff behind us.
The president had to make a proposal to try and shake things up. It was not a good faith proposal. It was not intended to end the shutdown.
Meanwhile, the president's still planning to give a State of the Union address 1 week from tonight. Location, TBA. You may recall House Speaker Nancy Pelosi asked the president to delay the speech or submit it in writing as used to be done. Pelosi had cited security concerns related to the shutdown. Senior administration official tells NBC News that White House speechwriters are working on, quote, separate passages. Sounds like a daytime soap. If Trump were to deliver the speech somewhere else, and perhaps to an audience other than combined members of Congress. Pelosi was asked about the plan for the speech earlier today.
We understand that the White House has sent a letter to the Sergeant at Arms that President Trump still intends to come give the State of the Union here next week.
We just want people to get paid for their work.
Tonight, the White House press secretary was asked about next week's plans.
Will the president deliver the State of the Union from the Capitol?
Nancy Pelosi made the invitation to the president on the State of the Union. He accepted. She cited security concerns as a potential reason to delay it. Those concerns were addressed by the Department of Homeland Security, the United States Secret Service. At this point, we're moving forward.
There's a podium inside she could use. Much warmer, no dice today. All the political maneuvering continues. This record-long shutdown now forcing nearly 1 million federal workers across this country to make difficult choices. Today, FBI agents issued a new report detailing how the shutdown is straining resources and hampering investigations. More on that just ahead. And justifiably, members of Congress are hearing about it, and it's getting louder and near impossible to defend back home. During a town hall in Iowa, Republican Senator Joni Ernst was confronted by one of her constituents.
I am deeply ashamed that we have, at the moment, federal employees in soup lines and trying to find food for their families while they're still working. And I wonder how in the world anybody in the Senate can defend that.
I don't think we can.
The president is having a tantrum.
The Senate is not going to wait any longer. We are voting to reopen the government on Thursday, folks. I want to see this government reopened. Let's see what the Democrats do. Let's see what they do.
And we have this from a TSA officer talking about her struggle through 5 weeks working without pay.
The job itself is already a stressful situation, but we feel disrespected. It's demeaning.
Let's bring in our leadoff panel for a Tuesday night, shall we? Shannon Pettypiece, I knew I was going to do that, White House correspondent for Bloomberg, Jonathan Lemire, White House reporter for the Associated Press, and we welcome to the broadcast Eliza Collins, politics reporter for USA Today, who covers Congress. Good evening and welcome to you all. You were the latest to post, Mr. Lemire. Where do we stand on this right now?
Well, on one hand, the fact that there are bills introduced in the Senate is being interpreted by some as a first step, perhaps, to some sort of solution, some sort of bipartisan solution. As indicated, neither of these measures are expected to pass. This is not going to reopen the government. It's still going to be closed on Friday unless something dramatic occurs that we don't foresee the next day or so. But there's a sense here this is finally Mitch McConnell engaging with the process. To this point, he has been very much content to take a back seat.
Why was that?
Because he doesn't want to anger President Donald Trump,
okay,
a fellow Republican who remains extremely popular with members of their shared party. So some are looking into this as this is perhaps a step in the right direction, but we have a long way to go. There's certainly pressure building in both parties. We know there are some Senate Republicans. You saw the video clip there, Senator Ernst getting additional heat from constituents. There's some pressure at home building to reopen the government. There are some centrist Democrats in the House who are trying to push Speaker Pelosi to put forth her own sort of compromise solution. To this point, of course, Pelosi has been very content to say, we're not going to give the president a dime for this wall. This is a moral issue, not just a political one. We're not going to do it. It's up to the president, who, let's all remember, said he would own the shutdown. It's up to him to come up with a solution to reopen the government.
Eliza, it's very good to have you on. We'll play off the point Jonathan just made as I read you this quote. New York Times profile of the Senate Majority Leader, quote, the shutdown distilled the essence of Mitch McConnell's position in Trump's Washington, a man of institutions and establishments whose own legacy was now tied to that of a president who seems hell-bent on burning both to the ground. Now, it strikes me you could also insert Paul Ryan into those same mentions and have the very same paragraph written. Question to you is, how much leverage, Jonathan correctly reports he's off the bench, how much leverage does McConnell have in this right now?
He really doesn't have very much leverage. In December, McConnell and the Senate unanimously passed a bill that would keep the government funded at the current levels. And if you remember, that got sent over to the House. The president said, I'm not going to sign that, although he had given indications to the Senate and to McConnell that he would sign it. So I think after that happened, McConnell basically said, all right, I'm only taking up something that the president will sign. And they thought that they put Democrats basically on the defense this weekend when the president came out with a proposal, an expanded proposal on what he would accept. There were some things in there that did make Democrats sort of have to think about it. Basically, 3-year protections for the so-called dreamers, undocumented immigrants who came to the country as children, and refugees who had been a temporary protected status. But there were also all sorts of things hidden in the bills that would change the way asylum seekers can come to the U.S. And so Democrats have really roundly rejected that. And so basically over the weekend, Republicans were feeling a lot more confident about that bill, though it didn't really look like it would pass. They thought at least they could make Democrats uncomfortable. But as more has come to light within the bill, it doesn't look like Democrats are going to get on board there either. So McConnell's scheduling a vote with Trump's bill because Trump wants that vote.
Shannon, I have a quote for you, as convenience would have it, from the Washington Post tonight. This speaks to the shutdown. Hundreds of Internal Revenue Service employees have received permission to skip work during the partial government shutdown due to financial hardship. And union leaders said Tuesday that they expected absences to surge as part of a coordinated protest that could hamper the government's ability to process taxpayer refunds on time. Now, there you go. Standing in an hour-long TSA line is one thing. Start screwing around with people's tax refunds. Now you've got the full, undivided attention of the American people. Shannon, the question is there any miracle in anybody's bag?
No, there is not. The White House does not know where the off-ramp is. This is not where they want to be. This was not in their plan. This was not in their priorities for their agenda. This is not where they wanted to be a month into 2019. They are looking for the off-ramp, and they don't know where it is. They have tried pretty much everything they can think of. They did the border visit. They did the Oval Office address. There was this proposal they came up with, and the sort of touted this announcement on Saturday to try and get the Democrats to the table. They're not making any progress. Tomorrow they're bringing in conservative leaders. They're going to have state and local leaders come in to try again, to show that they're doing something, but it is not budging the Democrats. They don't know how to get out of this. And to the point of the IRS workers, yes, this is starting to get real now. We're 33 days in, whether it's the IRS workers, you're going to be talking to people at the FBI later, whether it's grand jury that can't be impaneled because they can't pay grand jurors, whether it's, just people coming to a school trip to Washington, D.C. who have the museums closed. Little things are going to make this seem real. And the goal of the White House so far has been to make this shutdown not seem real, and the Democrats have been trying to make it feel real with things like canceling the State of the Union. But so the more and more this starts to feel real, the worse and worse it gets for the White House, not the Democrats.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.